it is such a gift to be able to talk about Swami because I've been able to relive all those special moments that I've had with him when he was in his physical body. And back in the 70s, he used to tell us in interviews, remember these moments because these one day will be your meditations. So, you know, I hope that my sharing my experiences will illuminate your memories and you know, you can feel that connection with Swami through your memories. And if any of you have never seen Swami in the physical, I hope some of my experiences will help you to feel that connection to him and his love, because that's what it's all about. So, I had a plan of what I was going to talk about today, and then Swami said, no, you're going to talk about something else. So, anyway, sometimes our plans just, you know, he's the one that's in charge. So today I'm going to talk about a very special time in my life, probably the best time of my life, when I got to live in India with Swami for 2 years. So I stayed there for the whole time. I never left, and wasn't planning on that. I knew I was going. In my mind, I was going for like 3 months. So I sold my car, I put all my things in storage, and off I went in '81. And so basically, I want to talk a little bit about those sand days that we used to call them, because it was a very, very special time. There was no Sai hall, and there was no hall at Vrindavan. It was all just sand. And one of my favorite things before darshan was the birds would fill the sky, and they would caw and chirp, and they would do these incredible patterns in the sky. Every kind of bird you can imagine. And then, I mean, it like a symphony announcing the Lord is coming, and then like this. They wouldn't fly back to the trees, but they would suddenly be in the trees, seated for their darshan. And the door to the interview room would open. So we would always know when Swami was coming, because all the birds would suddenly be back in the trees. And I also really enjoyed watching the lizards who would come out for darshan. So, you know, after the birds were back in their seats, lizards would come scurrying across the sand, and they would not move an inch, not move at all, until Swami had gone back in the interview room, because they wanted to have their darshan too. But what was really special was, after Swami would walk by, he would leave different designs in the sand with his gown. And sometimes he would give darshan, and there would be no footprints, you know, no designs in the sand from his gown, so it was like he was floating. Other times he would walk across the sand, and there'd be these very deep, like 2 or 3 inch holes where he had walked. And of course, after, you know, he had gone in for darshan, he'd all grab that sand and keep the sand where he had touched. And sometimes he would just leave very light footprints. So it was a very, very special time. And of course, you know, there were not a lot of people then, but we were able to be very close to him. So I want to talk about an interview that I had with him. It was in December of '81 when I'd been there. And he called us in to, this was a group from San Diego. And in this one moment, 3 seconds maybe, he demonstrated to me his highest teachings. We are one. I am the doer. you are an instrument in my hands. So he didn't look at me. You know, he was talking to everybody as he usually does, you know. I think he manifested a few things. And then suddenly, I wish I had a chair that had arms, because he put his hands like this on the arms of the chair, and he started to lean forward in his chair. And as he started to lean forward, now I'm taking a long time telling this, but this, you know, all happens just like in a couple seconds. As he's leaning forward, I suddenly get an impression in my heart that he's going to call me into the interview room. So it was just like, not even a thought, it was just an impression. So as Swami is pressing down, standing up, he kind of leans forward and goes like this. Again, he never looks at me, never says anything. Now I'm sitting cross-legged in a sari, and for a Westerner, it's very difficult to stand up in saris and do it gracefully without tripping all over the sari. So it takes some strategy, it takes some thought, you know, you have to get your feet in the right place, because it's difficult for us. So as Swami is standing up, my body is standing up. I didn't move a muscle. Swami stood me up with him. And, you know, it makes me think about this song that we sang to him in 2005 when the California choir went. And we sang a song to him that was very emotional for me, "You Raised Me Up." And that's exactly what he was doing. He lifted me up. I had nothing to do with it. So then he walks over a little ways away, still not looking at me, not saying anything to me, and then he goes like this. So, you know, he waved me to go into the interview room, and then he called this other woman. But I've never forgotten that moment, because it was a powerful example of how, you know, he's the doer. He's doing everything. We are just instruments for his power and love and energy. So after that interview, or after going into the inner interview room and him talking to me and this other lady, we came out. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you know, I've already been here for 3 months, and I think my trip is going to be over. I better ask him, you know, for permission to leave, because I don't think I'm going to be here any longer. So he walks by me, and I said, "Swami, you know, please, you know, tell me when I'll be leaving India, because I think I'm going to be leaving sooner." I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. And you know, it made me think about, I understand that during Rama's time, you know, he was 21 feet tall, and that's how Swami looked. He looked gigantic. And I'm kind of cowering, and he looks down at me like this, and he shakes his finger at me, and he says, "You meditate." He was very stern. So in the interview room, he had told me that was my sadhana, I was to do meditation. So, you know, he was saying, "You meditate." And I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. But what he was really saying was, I am training you to listen to me in your heart. We have that kind of connection. And by meditation is you think of me every moment. You be in tune with me every moment, every second of your life. That is your meditation. So I didn't really understand that right away, but that was what those 2 years were all about. And the beauty of that was to understand the difference between what's my mind, what's the divine voice within, the divine will within, and then to have him physically there to be able to confirm what I was feeling he was telling me inside. Because, you know, sometimes you can get carried away and follow your mind and think that it's really the divine voice within, and it isn't. So I was so grateful that Swami would confirm things to me. So, also in those days, we, it was kind of Gopi days. We could follow Swami around and we'd chase after his car, and we did all sorts of crazy things. But it wasn't that it was from my mind, it was I couldn't help it. I just had to be with him. And I'm saying we because I'm not the only one. There were other ladies there then that also had that same kind of inner guidance from Swami. But I got to the point where I knew where he was, and I knew what was going on with him, and I knew where to show up. And it wasn't because it was something that I'd heard, it was from within. So sometimes he'd go out, and I'd be somewhere in the ashram, and I'd get this inner feeling, oh, Swami's coming, and I'd run to the gate, and sure enough, Swami would be coming. So that was his grace. He was, he was developing that connection, that inner attunement, and it got deeper and deeper and more and more and more in tune. So the point where I'd be walking along in the street, and I would stop because I couldn't hear his direction. I couldn't hear what he was telling me to do or where to go. And so I would just stand there until I would get his direction. And I remember this one day, I was feeling out of touch with Swami inside, and I was feeling forlorn. And so, opposite the Southern Canteen is, the building where the council there is now. But anyway, I was sitting on those steps, and I had my head in my hands, and I was just talking to Swami. Swami, I just feel so bad, I'm feeling out of touch with you. I don't know what to do. I just can't feel you. I'm not getting your direction. And suddenly, now there's nobody around, which is obviously unusual. And suddenly I look up, and there's Swami's car right in front of me. And there's nobody around. I mean, that's unheard of. There would be people everywhere around his car. And this is right, of course, next to the main gate. And so he's driving, along the Southern Canteen there, and he looks over at me, and then he continues driving. But it's like, I'm right here. Maybe he just manifested himself in that moment for me. Those were the kinds of things he would do in those days. They were so beyond your imagination. So another thing that we would do, and it seems kind of like a game, but it was sincere on my part. I wanted so much to be 100% surrendered to him, and I wanted so much to only do his will, that, in darshan, I would ask him a question and say, okay, Swami, if you want me to do this, you're going to do this. Or sitting in the mandir, we would sit there for hours, all crushed in together. And sometimes he'd just come and sit down in the chair. Or during bhajans, if I had a question, I might say, Swami, I really want to know what your will is. Turn your head or something like that. So, he would do it. And then I would get a feeling in my heart knowing that, he's really confirming it. So I have so many examples of that, but this one time I remember, I just had this earnest desire to know what he wanted. Now, he never spoke to me in darshan. Never, ever outwardly would speak to me. And in those days, he was talking to people in darshan all the time. He'd go down the darshan line. That's just what he did. He talked to everybody in those days, but he wouldn't talk to me. So, of course, forcing me to go inside, forcing me to learn that inner kind of communication. But anyway, I remember this one darshan. I said to him, I don't remember what it was, but it was something very important. And otherwise, I wouldn't have tried to do this out in the darshan line. But I said, Swami, if you want me to do this, then you're going to raise your left arm all the way up above your head. Well, Swami's not going to do something like that, right? So immediately, I see them now. He's on the furthest point on the men's side. Now this is during the sand days when, you know, the men were all, you know, we were very, very far away. And I saw his arm go out, and I thought, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, that's my imagination. He's not really doing that. You know, I just imagined that. So I asked again and again. His arm went up like that. It was so crazy. And then I asked a third time. So I don't know if anybody else, the hundreds of people that were there that day, saw him do that, but he gave me that vision of him doing that to confirm that he was saying yes to what I wanted to do. So I want to talk about another interview that I had, because this was a very significant time. So it was another interview with the San Diego group, because I had been living in San Diego before I came for those 2 years. And we were sitting there, and Swami went around to each person, and he said, "Where are you from?" You know, the typical thing. People were saying San Diego, and he'd make a face. Like, he didn't like that answer, but, you know, that's what people were doing. So he must have asked like maybe 6 or 7 people. Now, I knew in my heart that I didn't want to say that. But he looks at me, he says, "Where are you from?" And I didn't know what to say, so I just said San Diego. I didn't want to say that, but that's what came out. And I was so disappointed in myself because he just makes this horrible face. Now, sitting next to me, then Swami leans forward and he looks at this woman sitting next to me and he says, in the softest, "Where are you from?" He's whispering. So I looked at her, and she was like in a state of samadhi. She wasn't there. She was gone. And mucus was streaming out of her nose. And so Swami said, wipe it, you know. So anyway, you know, he said, "Where are you from?" And she says, after a little while, she whispers, and you know that she's there. She's in that consciousness, in the highest level of consciousness. And Swami sits back, very happy, like finally there's somebody that gets it, right? You know, and he said, yes, I never forgot that moment. So my prayer to Swami was, "Swami, I pray that I will be in that state of consciousness, and I will stay there, surrendered to Brahman and to who I really am, and that someday you will ask me that question, and I can answer Atma." So I'm skipping ahead. I had been getting inklings. This is 2 years later now, when I thought, you know, I was going for 3 months. He kept me there for 2 years. I have a lot of, so many stories, but anyway. And remember, he never spoke to me in darshan, so I'd had a few indications that I might be leaving. He had given me some things that I would start knowing when I was leaving, when certain things happened. Like one thing was, you know, there was a rule, you could only stay in the ashram for 2 months. So I'd been there for 2 years. And I walk into the accommodations and they said, "Madam, I think you've been here more than 2 months." And I was like, "Yeah, I've been here 2 years." I didn't say that, but I thought, okay, Swami's getting me ready to leave. So anyway, this day, I remember what day it was. It was April 18th. Oh, I forgot. So remember that interview where he had said, "You meditate?" When I asked him, when should I go back? I had heard the word April. So here it is, a year and a half later in April. I come to Darshan. I'm getting this feeling that I'm going to be leaving soon. Now, this is a very unusual thing to describe, and I don't know if anybody, maybe many people have experienced this, but I'm going to do my best to try to describe this experience. So I'm sitting there, and Swami hasn't come out yet, but suddenly I feel this power coming to me, his presence, and it's filling the sky, but it's like coming to me. His divine love, his power. Has anybody ever experienced that, sitting in darshan? And anyway, I got the feeling, suddenly I had this thought, this darshan is for me. Then, of course the mind, that's just an ego thought. So anyway, then he comes out, and it's getting more and more powerful. He is radiating his love and his power to me. And I'm just getting lifted higher in consciousness. So he's walking along, very sauntering along, talking to a few ladies. Now remember, he has never spoken to me in darshan. So he gets, I'm like sitting where Sareka is, and he stops, and he looks at me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's gonna talk to me, I can't believe it. So he kind of steps towards me like this. And what does he ask me? Where are you from? Yes. And I was in the state. He had put me in such a deep, high state of consciousness in those 2 years of experiencing him that I was really there. So I said, I'm a Swami. And I'm whispering just like that lady from San Diego had. And what does he do? No. And I'm like, I couldn't believe it. I said, I'm a Swami. I've got to get it right. No. And he's going like this, no. And he says, and he's making that horrible face. And he says, no, and he doesn't say the USA, he says Argentina, Mexico, he names all these other countries. So then, I'm shrinking. I don't want to say a country. I don't want to, because I genuinely don't feel like that's where I'm from. It's not authentic. But I know that's what he wants. So he's like waiting for me to say, so finally I go, USA, like that. He says, So then he marches off, and then he's making some jokes to the ladies around me about the United States. But he is, I don't know how to really describe this, but he's talking to me as if he is still standing with me and he's having a conversation with me while he's walking away. Have any of you ever experienced that with Swami? Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. It was so wonderful, such a wonderful experience to have him, talking to me after he had actually come up to me. So, anyway, how's my time? Is my time up? What, 5 more minutes? 5 minutes? Okay. I have so many experiences I could share, but I'm going to share an RT story since I did RT today. So, this was 1985, Christmas time. Swami was in Vrindavan, and we were doing Nagasankirtan, and I was one of the Sevadals, and he hadn't made this announcement, but he was giving a gift to the Westerners, because there were a lot of Westerners there, to have an open house to invite them into Trey Brindavan, because I guess it had opened recently or something. Anyway, so we're doing Nagasankirtan through the village, and I'm a Sevadal, and I end up being, in the very back of the Nagasankirtan line, kind of, making sure everybody gets back into the ashram okay. And so by the time everybody gets in, they have closed the open house to the Trey Brindavan, and I didn't get to go in there. And I thought, I was disappointed because, that was my chance to see his new home. But it was okay. I wasn't, terribly upset about it. So anyway, so somehow I end up making it up to the front of the crowd, and it's mainly Westerners. Well, it's Westerners and Indians that are standing around. And so that was not when Swami had the hall in Vrindavan. Excuse me. That's when he had a little bandstand out. So Swami came out on the bandstand, and he was, it was archery time. So I'm standing there. And this woman who was a coordinator for Christmas, she has this arti plate. And she turns and she hands it to me, and I'm like, I'm not supposed to be doing arti. I'm not a coordinator, I was just a Sevadal. Well, I'm not supposed to do this, so I hand it back to her. And then she's going, no, you do. She hands it to me, and I'm like, no. Meanwhile, Swami he's standing there on the bandstand waiting to do arti. And he looks over and he's a little irritated. He's standing there waiting and, we're doing this thing. But I knew I was like, I'm not supposed to be doing this. Nobody told me about it ahead of time. So anyway, so she did arti. So, and I never had that feeling in my heart that was something I was supposed to do. So this was a really important lesson to me. So the next day, Darshan and I, end up in the front row. This is at Brindavan. Swami comes up to me, and he stands, and he goes, take. So he offers himself to me. And of course, I get to take Bhag Namaskar. It was absolutely wonderful. And I felt, as I was putting my head on his lotus feet, that I gave you the grace to do arti, and you didn't accept that grace, so I'm giving you this grace. I never forgot that Bhag Namaskar. But 20 years later, that woman came up to me and she said, Megan, I have never forgotten that moment of being able to do arti to Swami. It's one of my dearest memories. Thank you so much for letting me do arti, And I was like, well, of course, I didn't think it was, anyway. It felt so good to me that, I had to think about it a little more deeply. I could have just taken the arti plate and said, hey, I'm going to do this arti. This is my chance. But what joy it gave me that somebody else had such a wonderful, deep, meaningful memory with Swami. So, a few years later, this was in 2008, this was, we had an international SSEHB conference. And so the ladies that organized it came up to me and said, you're going to be doing arti today. So, along with this very, very close friend, and I thought, Swami, you're full circle. You've never forgotten that you gave me the grace to do arti to you, and now you're giving me another chance. So the irony of this is, you know, apparently some of the Western ladies had prepared the arty plate. And so there was other ladies doing arty also, Indian ladies. And so Swami's in his wheelchair now, you know, and arty has started, and everybody else's, their arty plates, you know, they've already started doing arty, and Krita and I cannot even get a match to light. So we're like, and I'm Swami, I've waited all these years for you to be able to do arty. You don't go, you know, we can't get it lit, and what's match after match after match, nothing's working. You know, we get the match lit, and then the wick doesn't light. Oh, it was just, you know, like going crazy. So finally, we're about halfway through arty. Finally, so Swami's already at his car, and I'm just thinking, oh no, you know, we're not going to be able to do arty to him. But the compassionate Lord turns, instead of getting to the car, which he often does, you know, at that point, he says, turn my chair around. And by then, the flame is going. And so we're able to finish arty to him. And he sits there through the whole thing, and you know, it was just one of my most precious, precious memories. And the compassion of Swami to, you know, answer our prayers and to give us grace that we don't even know we've earned. It's just his grace. So anyway, thank you so much for sharing. It's been a wonderful opportunity.
Wow. Even I think all the stories, keep it. We will call you. We have more sessions coming.